Hello, friends, and welcome back to the seventh episode of Crux of the Matter. We have a very special episode for you guys today, as I have my good friend Arthur Ryan on with us to talk about music. And I think we can all say that music plays a pretty big role in our lives. And if you don't listen to music, you should start. So, with that, I'll hand it off to Arthur here. Arthur, tell us about yourself.
Alrighty, thank you very much, Landon. My name is Arthur Ryan. I am a sophomore at the University of Montana, where I study vocal performance. And vocal performance is basically, well, it sounds just exactly what you think it would be. Performance, musical performance having to do with the voice.
Awesome. So, yeah, vocal performance here. Riley, anything you want to add?
No, man. I think people who have listened to the podcast for a while, even though I can do impressions, could probably tell I'm not able to sing very well. But nonetheless, music is a really interesting subject. I listen to lots of it. I listen to rap, which there's debate about whether that counts as music, and I'm sure we'll get to that eventually. But this is gonna be a fun episode. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we have a lot to cover. So I think starting off, we just want to mention, starting off shallow here, what is the difference between speech and singing? Anyone want to
Well,
start?
one of the differences between your speaking voice and your singing voice has to do with the way you manage your breath. Um, in speaking, you're not really thinking about how your breathing affects the way that, say, um, your speech is rhythmed or metered or anything like that.
Hmm.
Now, with singing, you have a sustained tonality to the voice. So, for example, if I were just to say this sentence as speaking, it doesn't really sound like music to you.
Hmm.
But if I were to sustain my notes on a
Hmm.
bit of a certain tone, you can start getting a little semblance of music to it.
Hmm.
And speaking also doesn't really have a set rhythm in the way that music does. There is a meter to speaking, no doubt, because say if you were to put stresses on different syllables, it would sound weird. So there's kind of a set rhythmic structure to speaking, but it's not all precise like music is.
Hmm.
And almost like poetry, there's kind of this gray area, you'd say. Yeah.
Hmm.
Huh. And it's amazing because we all can identify it, but it's very hard to put into words. Like, what is that difference? And I don't know
Hmm.
if you know, like tone versus pitch. Do those two words mean significantly different things?
In my, in, I often use them interchangeably. Um, a tone or a pitch to me is just, especially in Western custom with our 12 tone um, temperament system with notes like
Hmm.
the 12 notes on the piano or a scale. Um, I use tone or pitch to refer to one of those, like C, B, F sharp, or anything like that.
Hmm.
So specific notes, you'd say, rather than just in general music. Okay.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then if you were to refer to like the sound quality of a pitch, you would call it the timbre. So say I was singing a note C and the piano was playing a note C. We're singing the same pitch or tone, but they have different timbres.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
fun.
Hmm.
Which, yeah, we could get much deeper into music
Oh
theory and
yeah.
all that jazz, but
Hmm.
I guess to stay more on track with the topic of this is asking you, the audience, right now, why does this matter? Again, we'll come back to
Hmm.
it. So, if we are trying to get the intersection between culture and politics, faith, religion, where does music factor into this? And so, I think I want to address more of a metaphysical question: is does music exist in the way that matter exists, or does it just exist something above that?
Hmm.
And Is it almost that metaphysical nature where we'd say math? Math doesn't exist. Numbers are not math. They're representations of math. And it brings me back to this great reference in Mere Christianity, which Riley, thank you for pointing that out to me.
Mm.
Because I've been reading it recently and just seeing these things. There's a moral law, something above which we see with our own eyes, but it still exists. And we see music factors into that, doesn't it? It's a part of that.
Yeah. I would say one thing about music is that it's kind of a funny thing because it can be a bridge between the world of ideas, like the things this podcast is mostly about: politics, history, philosophy, religion, and it can be a bridge over to um, esoteric things, I guess. Like music can kind of it's sort of like one of those little bubble diagrams where there's two of them and they overlap. So you
The
have
Venn
art over
diagram.
here. Yeah, you have
I
art
love
over
that
here,
diagram.
art and beauty over here, and the world of ideas. And sometimes music is in the middle, and it's certainly, um, I would say it's a similar discipline to art in a lot of ways. But it's funny because it's like talking about music theory, the circle of fourths, which I don't really understand, but to the best of my knowledge, it can sort of point out how music is mathematical in some way. And so I think music is sort of a bridge to it's sort of a bridge between philosophy and beauty and math, which there's not really anything that occupies that space there, which is one thing that makes music really unique and really important because it can be used to communicate ideas. And people like Prince, Michael Jackson, the late '90s, Tupac, Eminem, these people like whether the the quality of the things they're saying in their music, we can obviously argue about all day, and we're not necessarily huge fans of, certainly sometimes, but the ideas do have an effect in the real world and in the culture. And so I think because of that, music actually does have a special role, and it's not out of place for this podcast, even though I don't know what I'm talking about.
Arthur, any thoughts?
I think you actually summed it up really well. And I was gonna mention, but then you covered it about
Mm,
how music is in itself a language. It transmits ideas
mhm,
in a way that normal normal spoken language sometimes can't. I mean, and well, you could go down the rabbit hole of tonal languages such as Mandarin, where the inflection you put on different words means different things. But
mhm,
normally, the tonality of music adds a whole different layer of meaning to what's being said or what's being shown.
mhm.
Hmm, that's good to know. And so I just realized, Riley, if you can pull up the document that ends up having our kind of format, I cannot look that up because I am currently recording on this.
Oh,
But if
uh,
you just want to help keep us on track in the future,
format, yeah, sure.
that'd be cool.
So so we covered the difference between speaking and singing, and you were gonna get you had on the next thing right below that brief history, which is the Greek word. I'm gonna butcher it. Musique, Mousike, art of
I
the
think it's
muses.
musiki, siki,
Mm,
I
begins
think
with C.
musiki or something like
yeah,
that.
Musiki.
yeah.
And how, I guess, yeah, I can start here. Let me just pin myself with it meaning the art of the muses. And
Mm,
so it's kind of a curious history. We all kind of derive these words from different places. And this one just happens to work from Greek mythology. And so with that, uh, you can see that there's Zeus and he has daughters, and he also has the muses, which represent different artistic forms of things. And they kind of are this source of inspiration. And to
mm,
see that people for thousands of years have seen that is something unique and special.
mm,
And to now take it more modern, where we remove, of course, the mythological part of it, but it still has the core meaning of it draws inspiration. It somehow appeals to the sentiments which we feel. And hopefully it does more than that, which we
mm,
can argue moving forward. Does it actually shape society, or does society shape it? Uh, but
mm.
yeah.
Music is similar to art in the way that it can bring new ideas in that are taboo. um, that things like that if it were like just a normal public debate you can't really bring up. And so in art, sometimes it can sneak in through literature. Shakespeare is famous for this, for secretly criticizing the government despite it not being allowed, basically, through his plays, and that's one example. And art, there are like, there's a big argument in the 20th century about people, or actually way before that too, about like whether nudity is okay in art and that sort of thing. And that discussion, whether nudity was okay in art, ended up being carried over to the public sphere, which is whether nudity is okay in public, which is a whole nother thing. But
Yeah.
music can also do these things. I don't think things that David Bowie and Prince, and those sorts of people in the 80s, the weird sort of things they were singing about, and the obvious example that everyone runs to, which is rap, and the violence in the music, whether it has any real world effect. It's one of those things where it is sort of a chicken or the egg question. I think, like you mentioned in the notes, Landon. But
I didn't
it
catch that.
seems. Oh, you didn't? Okay. Well, that was Arthur. Well, good idea,
No
Arthur.
worries.
Yeah. But I do think it's one of those things where there's a push and pull. Sometimes music can start it, and I think sometimes music reflects the culture.
Yeah, if it is a
Mhm.
reflection or not. Let's see. Before I continue on to the overarching idea, did you want to add anything?
Well, again, going to the whole idea of music being a reflection of culture and kind of the origins of music. Um, I think one of the reasons why music has had its place in human societies for as long as it has is the is for two reasons. Um, One, it's it makes music makes things really easy to remember
Mm,
for some reason. I'm not quite sure why. I'm not a musicologist in that sense,
mm,
but things are always easier to remember when they're put in songs. Um, and the second reason is that music can help people bond together by being together in a sense of rhythm or tonality as well, or in harmony.
mm,
Ooh, this mentions a great point, which I want to, yeah, bring up. So you mentioned it helps us remember things, right? And when if anyone takes theology class, you'll learn about oral tradition. And so before, of course, people had written things down, the Bible in its different fragments was passed down orally. And you can see these hymns and all these songs, which we sadly don't have the tunes to anymore. It'd probably be pretty cool if we did, but
mm,
you can see the passing down generation to generation of these large stories. And that's why the Old Testament, especially, is so story bound, because you can tell these in forms like ballads, you can tell them in hymns, and they get passed down with a surprising amount of accuracy. And others can argue, so yes, divine inspiration, but there also is a human element to it. And that human element, which music just drives, is so cool because thousands of years, and you still have a remarkably similar story when it's passing on song. And it kind of comes to this point of, yeah, was music something that just like evolved? Because the materialist might say, well, music is something that just came out, right? And so all of us here, Arthur, you're Catholic, so we don't have too diverse of opinions here, but
mm,
where I'd say music completely opposes the materialist worldview is that it again speaks to something above nature's provision, and
mm.
yet it is natural, which is so cool.
Yeah. There's this guy named Dr. Stephen C. Meyer. I don't know if either of you guys have ever heard of him, but he does some good work on explaining the burdens of proof that atheists actually have to go through. I know we had this whole thing on our channel for like 3 weeks where atheists were getting very, very upset with me, but and just the things they sort of have to explain. And but there's this one interesting fact he brings up, which is every single time we find some sort of language, that language is indicative. I don't know if he specified written language. I'm pretty sure it's just language. He said that every time we find language, it's a sign of intelligence, and DNA is the most complex language that exists on the planet. It's way more complex than anything written in code. It's way more complex than, even the most complicated symphony you could play on a piano. And because DNA is four-dimensional, and that's a whole nother story. But it's one of these things where, music seems to tell us about something higher to me. And I think it sort of ties us back to, why we have the podcast, because we want to talk about things that are true and good and beautiful. And this is one of those beautiful things.
Right.
Mhm.
The natural beauty indeed.
Hmm.
So I think at this time we can continue on to our next segment, which is music a social construct or is it natural?
Mm.
And so it kind of comes back to the old, let's see if I can get this out of the way, that there's this question of, okay, well, if they teach us these things in school, if they teach us music theory, if they teach us how to make music, if we have to learn an instrument, if we have to produce music through practice, is it natural? There's questions that, like, okay, it can be more beautiful, or there's something more about the rhythm, the meter, the whole organization of it that is unique to learning. But you can't say like you just created this, like it's a construct of our imagination
Mm.
where we're like, okay, we choose these notes and we choose this, and it just is like blah, it's here.
Mm.
Versus there's something which when you hear a note, I want you to think of the Jaws theme song. Does that inspire some sort of joy? Or are we completely indoctrinated to think that that produces suspense or like a trepidation, some fear? Or is there this natural understanding of how music produces reaction? Is there a
Mm.
feeling? And I'd love to hear both your guys' opinions because I think that there's something above which there's some gray areas. I think Mozart's music can often create different reactions, joyful
Mm.
versus like nostalgic versus these things. But the really large like Jaws theme song versus what would you say is some like joyful music in general?
Yeah, I
Hmm.
would I've never seen Jaws, but um it's that song is so do like that whole song is like so iconic that everyone has heard it before. And yeah, I don't know. It's not necessarily evil or anything, but it's certainly suspenseful because the way the notes start out gapped, like it's just like the first two, then the next two, and then the gap gets like it goes from like a 16th to an eighth to a fourth or something like that. Like the gap just like exponentially shrinks until it's like
It's
do 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 at the end. So
it brings up an interesting topic in composition called text painting, where well, we're not really painting with text here in this Jaws piece. There's no vocal text at all to it,
mm,
but John Williams is using a clever technique to derive up the feeling of suspense and terror by speeding up the or shortening the intervals between the notes.
mm,
Um, it's built in my interpretation. The reason why he's doing that is to evoke a feeling of something like the shark is
mm,
speeding up and coming at you,
mm,
and there's nothing you can do. It's just coming towards you slowly at first, and then it just rushes towards you in a feeling of dread.
mm.
And I think, and that pairs really nicely with what actually happens in the movie Jaws, and that ties back to what I was saying earlier about how music is a language that can enhance what's already being shown or what's already being said.
Mm.
Try listening to a horror movie muted.
Yeah,
Right?
that I was about to
Mm.
say something like that,
Sorry.
or just try to
Yeah.
try to watch any movie muted and then watch it with music. You'll see that the music underneath all the dialogue and the cinematography adds just a whole another dimension
Yeah,
to
Star
the
Wars
record.
is B the original Star Wars is B-ray acting with awful special effects if you listen to it muted.
Oh,
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
you
enough.
have no faith.
Yeah. Also, John James Earl Jones totally makes that movie. If they would have used anyone else for Vader, it would not have worked out well. But
Oh yeah, there's a recording somewhere of the original
the big
actor
tall
just
Scottish guy,
yeah,
yeah.
reciting his lines. It's not terrifying at all. But I digress.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what it sounds like.
But it's funny how the tone of something can affect how the tone of what's being said can affect your interpretation of it.
Mm.
True. Very, very true.
And you can also go down the rabbit hole of how that works with sarcasm in the English language,
Oh,
or sentences that mean completely different things depending on how you inflect them. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and you go to languages too. Yeah, like the whole ordeal of speech. It's amazing how just complicated yet, yeah, real
Mm.
it is.
Similar to punctuation in written language, where let's eat, grandma, or let's eat, grandma. Like
Yeah.
that whole stupid thing. Similar. I don't know, in my mind anyway.
With Colin.
In a way, yeah, it has to do with rhythm and the stuff and the how you inflect the grammar and the stopping between eat. It also
Mhm.
works, yeah.
And so it's not a fun podcast unless I mention a quote by Aristotle. So let's do
Yes.
this. Where it says, "It is not easy to determine the nature of music or why anyone should have a knowledge of it." That
Mm.
is a quote. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's in Aristotle's book Politics.
Yep.
He mentions some about music in Book 8. So it might be from there.
Yeah,
It's
book 8, chapter 3.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, from memory, Riley's
Yeah.
genius.
Not from memory. I read it 10 minutes ago. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Fair enough.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the nature of Aristotle, and everything he writes is attempting to classify it, and right, and everything has a purpose. And he's, to me, like I told Landon about this whole stupid idea I have for a book eventually about Plato and Aristotle and Solomon and all these different philosophers. But the thing that Aristotle does is he's the most logically perfect philosopher that ever was. Like if his premise is true, his logic is so flawless throughout every book. It's just super, super good. So it's basically a question of which premises are true. But as far as like he's looking for the purpose and everything, like there must be some reason we do this, and music was confusing to him. But he was talking about it in the context of educating children. And the four things he said four things that one of them is like physical exercise. So, like in ancient Greece, it would have been wrestling. Another would have been writing. Another would have been art. And the fourth was music. And music was the one that most confounded him.
The other thing that confounded him was how many teeth women have. It's
Why
Funny
would
all,
enough,
they have more
speaking
teeth? There's no reason.
all the haters in the comments. Aristotle's logic's completely wrong because he didn't know how many teeth women have. But
Yeah.
everyone gets something wrong, apparently.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of speaking of philosophers being confused by the idea of music, um, in my reading before doing this podcast with y'all, I found out that Freud had a very particular dislike for music, most
Wow.
music.
That's
Shocker.
Yeah, who knew?
Shocker.
And I'm going to read you a quote by him having
Mm,
to do with why he has such a resistance to music.
mm,
Quote, I am no connoisseur in art, but a simple layman. Nevertheless, works of art do exercise a powerful effect on me, especially those of literature and sculpture, less often of painting. I spend a long time before them trying to apprehend them in my own way, to explain to myself what their effect is due to. Wherever I cannot do this, as for instance with music, I am almost incapable of attaining any pleasure. Some rationalistic, or perhaps analytic, turn of mind in me rebels against being moved by a thing without knowing why I am thus affected, and what it is that affects me.
mm.
in the mind of a man who can't explain something, detests it.
Yeah. Yes, he does not. Yes, he does not understand it. Therefore, he does not really like it all that much.
Yeah. If he doesn't understand something, he doesn't value it. But I mean, if we're going to judge by that, then I don't know. I
Yeah,
guess we shouldn't value anything Freud ever wrote at all because it's
yeah.
very hard to
He's
understand.
had some. He's had some interesting. He's had some interesting ideas. That's for sure.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not a
But
huge Carl Jung fan, but if I'm going to pick between him and Freud and that stupid rivalry, I'm going to pick Carl Jung every time.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So where should we take the conversation next? That is the question.
Mm.
Ah,
Do we want to continue into the question of music's benefits for you? Not sponsored
Mm.
by pseudoscience. We can
Yeah,
all
I'm down
list
with
off
that.
a few of these in the list. So one, did you know that music can help lower your heart rate. Fun fact.
Mm,
Of
believable.
course, the type of music
Yeah.
probably matters.
Yeah, depending. Yeah. You have like a soft symphony versus like Metallica.
Yeah.
Probably, right? And
Yes.
interestingly, it also can influence our eating. We tend to eat in rhythm with the music that we listen to. So faster music, you'll eat faster, whereas slower music will cause you to eat slower. Which,
Hmm.
if you're a parent, this could be a really handy trick if your kids eat too fast or too slow.
Mm.
There you go.
Just play the music.
That's why I feel like I feel like such a hog at home when I go to a restaurant and they're always playing that stupid, like really slow music in the background, like Italian restaurant or something, and then it takes me forever to eat. I'm like, oh crap, I wasn't paying attention.
Oh, that's good. Huh.
Hmm. I wonder if restaurants know this, know about this and purposely select the music to, I don't know, somehow maximize either sales or how long someone's in there or something like that.
Hmm.
Who knows?
Huh. That would be good study to conduct. Yeah.
Good study. For now, it'll be my conspiracy.
Oh, yeah. That's good. And then let's see some other things. If we want to try to make some correlation between music and society,
Hmm.
music inspires and it creates this awe and wonder, and which I'll argue music is inherently religious. Let's have this fun discussion.
Okay.
I think we've been
All
given
right.
music because you see passages like I think Ephesians 5:19, let us all rejoice, have music. I should probably memorize the verse, but I do not have it memorized.
Hmm.
And then in
Sing and
Revelations,
make music. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord.
awesome.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yes, they're fact check true.
Yeah.
And
Fact
then
check.
and then in Revelations also says like let every creature on the earth, in the heavens, under the earth, all sing. There's definitely a very biblical element to singing. Of course, all cultures have singing, so some might say, well, why is Christianity special with it? So our worldview is then that we have been given music to praise the Lord. And St. Augustine has this great quote where when I sing, I pray twice.
Hmm.
It adds a different depth to it.
Yeah.
And so, what do you guys think?
Floor is yours.
I I really do empathize. So when I'm not in college or when I have the time to, and especially when I was in high school, I used to sing at my local parish. So I always got that quote from St. Augustine from multiple different people, coming up
Hmm.
and talking to me after the mass, and I really do agree with it. Um, Again, music can inspire a deeper connection with what you're saying in terms of emotion. So when you're singing, like say it's Palm Sunday, and you're singing a piece that's very, joyous at first, but then once you start getting towards like the middle of the mass, you start breaking out in the more passionate and sadder pieces as throughout the mass Jesus is getting betrayed.
Hmm.
Um, that's a really powerful experience singing some of those pieces. Oftentimes, I find it hard to keep my eyes dry in
Yeah.
some of those songs because it's just so the the way that it's the way that the chord structures are built. It's just so full of passion that you can't help but weep for what happened to
Hmm.
Jesus at that time.
Yeah. It brings a new impact to it, and one of my favorite songs of all time. Usually it's a Christmas song, but I listen to it all year. Oh Holy Night, and the version I listen to, everyone should go look this up. Look up David Phelps, Oh Holy Night. This is literally the best rendition of one of the best songs ever. And like I've listened to that song like 70 something times in the last 2 years since I discovered it, and I literally get goosebumps every single time. It's so good. He's got one of the best voices ever. The guy on the piano is absolutely killing it the entire time. At the end, they have a choir. It's so, so good. But yeah, everyone should
Wow.
go find that.
Wow. Well, I think we're approaching the end of this, Umi, but after the break, we want to discuss the question, why then does Christian music suck? Or does it?
You know what? I kind of, especially
So
more like the new
save
age
your
stuff, I have to
thoughts.
agree. But
You're
the more
right. We
modern
do
stuff,
need cheers. Cheers
Yeah,
of
that's a good
reason.
way to go to break.
And welcome back from the break. We are covering the very, very controversial big topic of why is Christian music just not hitting it for most people today? So, I will first introduce the first point of the argument. Christian music is trying to secularize itself to fit into the societal stance on music, and in doing so, losing its place and its foothold in the historical tradition of Christian music. My first point is that we see these places like Hillsong United. We see these overall, they're their own companies now. They've really tried to make a business out of singing in a sense that it definitely seems to deter from the Christian aspect of we're trying to praise God in our worship and singing versus just trying to make it sound pretty. And I think music, if you don't try too hard, is beautiful. There takes talent in it, but it's inherently beautiful. And so when we see these things, also the scandals. Oh yeah, is there something you want to add?
I know. I was going to say there's something inherently beautiful from an organic performance than rather trying to, make it too perfect or, yeah.
So are we being distracted by the smoke and mirrors of the performances and losing sight of the actual meat of the singing? And so are we losing our sight on Christ? I think that's a major thing about why Christian music is losing its taste. Because we were talking about like Mendel's Hallelujah chorus is a part of his The Messiah, right?
Yeah,
that's correct. And how there's these classical musical pieces which are absolutely mind blowing. I mean, just the precision and the beauty in that singing, and kind of this transition, like Amazing Grace, and these songs which are natural treasures in their own sense. And then we see songs today, like I always mention Oceans. It's ad nauseum played. And the question is, does it have the same resonance with people as the old songs used to?
Cringe.
And
That's
I don't
what
think
I think.
they do.
Cringe.
So I'm opening up the floor.
Yeah, I'll kind of take it from you a little bit. I think there's somebody, being a longtime fan of rap and hip hop, if you want to track Christian music's progression from, what the message is about and becoming secularized, there is literally nowhere better to look than Lecrae, who's like the biggest, Christian hip hop guy of all time, other than maybe that group that Toby Mac was in, another pretty big guy. But Lecrae's like, you listen to his original albums and they're sort of Christ-centered in their Christian music, certainly, and you like move on. These people that are in his entourage, like his record label, like someone like Andy Mineo singing, like basically their songs are mostly about this some one thing, and there's like Christ sprinkled in, which sort of mirrors a lot of things that churches do nowadays, where we're doing this thing and like Christ is going to be like sprinkled in, like they put on like a it's constantly events and stuff. It's like, oh, we're going to do this church barbecue, and it's like you're going to pray before the meal, and that's good enough, which is I'm fine. Like, have church barbecues. I'm not saying that's wrong. It's not wrong to have a church barbecue, but like constantly only doing events and then leaving Christ sort of on the side, it's just not good. Not good. And these it's just Hillsong, like one of them, Reckless Love. God's love isn't like, how could his love be reckless when, like, by definition, he knows what's going to happen in every scenario. He's all knowing. He has your best interest for you. Yes, he does love you. Yes, I'm not throwing out that other part. But reckless love, it's just such garbage theology. And you listen to songs like, "Oh, Holy Night, the stars are brightly," like, even listen to something mainstream in America. Listen to Bing Crosby's "God Rest You Merry Gentlemen" from the 1950s. And that song is like, "God rest you merry gentlemen, put tidings of something, remember Christ our Savior, who came to free us from Satan's power," something like that. But it's like there's actual theology in the song, which like nowadays is like, yes, like like you're begging for it basically. And this is part of my long thesis. I think one thing we were talking earlier about the sort of push and pull and whether culture affects music or music affects culture. And I think a lot of times music does affect culture, but it affects culture only if the person producing the music or the group producing the music is so big that so many people have heard it that it's like, they're becoming an icon and not so much the music. Whereas a lot of music the music is a reflection of the times. And, just another example, in degenerate rap, you can tell whether it's 90s or 2000s, not from the beat, not from anything else, but you can tell based on what kind of drug it is. It's like, it's a post 2010 song if it's about weed. If it's about crack, then it's probably a 90s song.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway.
The history.
Yeah, it's interesting about the biggest examples of music driving culture rather than the other way around is during the 60s, Beatlemania, that took the world by storm. And, then there's that one instance where, I can't remember which member of the Beatles it was that was saying that they were more famous than Jesus or something to the effect of that.
Lennon, maybe? Probably Lennon.
Probably Lennon.
Yeah, probably that guy.
That didn't go very well.
Yeah, him and his friggin' Imagine. The most pretentious communist garbage song ever. But it is a pretty good piano solo, not gonna lie.
Yes, it does. It has a good tune to it, but the lyrics can, sometimes leave something to be desired.
Yeah, the Babylon Bees parody of that is hilarious. Another thing recommended for our listeners. But yeah, Beatles certainly changed the culture, and it was like people forget that that was a British group, and that was like that was like a worldwide phenomenon. I didn't even know that they were British until, a couple years ago, probably when I was in high school, but.
And then they paved the way for so many other British bands down the line, and they're probably the reason why they're probably one of the reasons why our culture today still has such a fixed obsession with British music. Like, take for instance Harry Styles or the like.
Yeah. Or that one guy who's got like orange hair and he looks like Ron Weasley
Ed
if he had
Sheeran.
glasses. Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Ed
Yeah.
Sheeran.
But yeah, I kind of digress a bit.
Going back to this question of does the beat matter more than the lyrics? And I think there's a question of our culture now, especially teenagers. I think you want a good beat, depending on your mood. Either something that's solemn for when you're feeling kind of depressed, or you want a more joyful beat after a good celebration. Our moods tend to try to correlate with the music we listen to, or vice versa, and we end up setting this kind of weird balance with where things should be. Our priorities placed on the lyrics of the song, because again, what we listen to will shape our worldview, will shape our thoughts and our beliefs, versus is it just about that beat? Like, I just want this catchy tune. And I think that goes back to the question of Christian music. They've lost the same appeal to the masses of having the good beat, and even the lyrics might be watered down, which Riley hit a really good point about them. Yeah, just sprinkling in little Jesus here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jesus is not a seasoning; he's the main course. Like
so true.
And it's sort of like all Christian culture has been pretty garbage since post 1950s, 60s probably. I mean, first of all, like Landon has heard me talk about this before, and we'll probably eventually have to do an episode about it, but like the generation gap and things that certain generations do in the West at least. And I really don't like boomers, even though, there's most conservative generation and everything like that. No, they were the Woodstock generation. They were summer of 71. That was all them. And they're the people who fell for the televangelists, the Benny Hinn, Kenneth Copeland, that guy who got famous. If you guys don't raise $2 million by midnight tonight, God told me he's going to strike me down, and like that kind of crap. And you'll still find boomers defending televangelists today. And it's just like, it's one of these things where religion, like we abdicated our job, not we, maybe some of you listening aren't doing your job as a Christian. Like we said, it's not a private religion. You have 3 jobs as a Christian. You become more like Jesus. You help other Christians become more like Jesus, and you spread the word to people who don't already know it. I've said that like 1,000 times. But like the people who didn't do their job, if Christians abdicate their throne, then it's like, there's that verse, and there was a really interesting interpretation of it, but it's the God can raise up rocks like for children of Abraham if you don't do your job, basically what John the Baptist says to the Pharisees. And he can raise, there's parts in the Old Testament like God can raise up rocks to bring him praise. Like we're not, we got to remember that it's about him, not about us, even though in some parts of the story it's about us. At the end of the day, it's about God. And so if we abdicate our job as Christians, someone's going to do it for us. And so if true things have to come from non-Christian sources, that can work for a little while, but eventually that person isn't rooted in the thing that is the most true, And so, Christian music post televangelist prosperity gospel, Christian music got really bad. There's not very many good examples of Christian painters. There's not, like, all art. There's no Christian poetry. There's nothing. There's no good Christian art, other than here and there in individual cases. But as a trend line, like, you got to think, all the famous paintings that you think about from medieval times and the Renaissance, pretty much all of those are Christian, and a good amount of them are, like, straight up Catholic. And that's just, I think this is one of those things where you can use music as sort of that thing, I forgot the name of it, the thing doctors wear around their neck with the little thing to check your heart.
Stethoscope?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Landon. Thank you for helping me. I totally forgot. Yeah, exactly. You can use it as a stethoscope of culture, and like straight up all of Western culture right now, like not just Christian Western culture. Christian Western culture is a microcosm, but I think because we've abdicated our job, then, if we're not being the light of the world, then oh crap, the world is like, there will be little
the culture will let their light in.
Yeah, and their light is darkness, If the light in you is if the light that is in you is darkness, then how great is the darkness, And that's sort of one of these things. Like this sort of leads us into our conversation we wanted to have about rap. And I'm of the opinion that, I listen to rap, I listen to hip hop, but I listen to Christian rap and hip hop, and I don't listen to Lecrae or Andy Mineo anymore. I have one or two old songs from those guys, but I listen to these guys you've never heard of. Like one of them is Braille. His name's Brian Winchester. He's a pastor in Portland. He was like one of the two members of Beautiful Eulogy, which is like a spoken word group, one of my favorites. I listen to Eshawn Burgundy, Jackie Hill Perry, a couple other people like that, Bryson Gray, just some random people like that. And so, but as a whole, like Christian music and all music is not doing great right now. And rap is like, me and Landon, okay, we go to college. We have these public bathrooms in these stalls, not public, but our whole floor, we live in the same floor. We have one bathroom. There are 4 shower stalls. The garbage music people listen to and pretend is good is like so awful. Like I've been a fan of rap for the longest time, and even Tupac, who's not not the greatest role model or anything, but an insanely talented musician in my opinion. And I was like, oh, imagine if Tupac had to listen to this mumble rap. Every mumble rap song is a beat with like that. Like it turns into like a really bad chant, and it's just
and
like,
a cuss word every 3 syllables.
Yes, and it's so brutal. It's just hard to listen to. So, I understand why people say that rap isn't music, but I think we should turn it over to the guest who actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to music. Arthur, do you think rap counts as music?
I think, in short, yes. Rap, well, I'd classify it as music if it has a sort of harmonic structure underlaying the lyrics, like, a backing track or whatnot. Then I'd consider it music because it actually has harmony, or it has functional harmony to it. If it's just without it, again, it's just like, reciting poetry, which is not bad at all, but it's not really, doesn't have that musical touch to it. But yeah, rap is a way, again, to express. A lot of rap is to express hardships that the rapper either currently faces or has grown up facing, and it's like all good music is a form of expression.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'd classify it as music.
Okay. Whew. Wow, that was
Yeah.
close. Yeah. But yeah, there's definitely like the harmonic structure is definitely a thing, and you can see it in rhyming schemes where it's not just like it's not like poetry when they teach you something like okay line it's like A B B or A B A B something like that, but it's like there's a structure to their words. There's a song I have, it's about the seed. It's about the seed of Abraham. It's really good, and it's called "10 to Get In" by what's his name, Jay Givens, and has one of the members of Beautiful Eulogy on it, not Braille, the other guy, Odd Thomas. And there's just a part in there where it's like he hits the words like this, like each word at a time, and then he just like does it a couple times, and then he switches back to a rhythm. And a lot of these hip hop and rap songs, the rapper will have like as the chorus, it will be someone who's featured on the song who's actually singing. And some rappers can sing to some degree. There's a song by Eshawn Burgundy, who's my favorite rapper, and I think it's called New Jerusalem or something like that. It was his single he released last year. It's really good, and there's just a chorus like New Jerusalem, come down, down, like something like that in the background. So I'm not gonna attempt it because I'm really not a musical person.
Well, yeah, and then before we get on to our final guest, who will explain their argument for whether rap is music or not, I'll mention my stance on Parlay. I was the last one here to really consider it a form of music. I always just took the old kind of it wasn't even an argument, it was just kind of a brushing off, like, oh, rap isn't music.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really consider it, like, okay, it easily is a form of music with that expression. Like Arthur, you said functional harmony, I think was the way you termed it. If it gets beyond just poetry in the sense of just having words go fast in some sort of order.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the extra element to it is it good music?
Mm-hmm.
And that gets us back to this good and beautiful thing. And I think where our society is at really helps define where rap is at, which I think the majority of us will say society is not in a good place. And so rap inevitably won't be in a good place. And we see that raising children where parents have to really watch what their kids listen to, because in these rap songs anymore, there is just such decadence. I mean, you've completely eliminated barriers and you're trying to promote such filth in a good beat.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like wrapping up just the most grotesque figure in a really nice box and put a bow on top, throw it on your Christmas tree, which just happened over a week ago, and say, here's this beautiful, good music, when you open it up and I mean there's nothing in here of actual substance. And we can see it can meet people, because in order for it to be popular it somehow resonates with people, but is it the sort of resonating that should be happening? And I'd say no. Wow. So music, yes. Yeah. Overall good music, rare.
No.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. And the only thing is too is that people will say that because of what rap is, it's like inherently like debaucherous, and I don't really agree with that. You can go back and find there's a group called the Jubilaires, and it's like a 1940s like barbershop quartet, and this is actually where rap gets a lot of its roots from. And you can find here and there, you can find a couple of 80s rap groups completely different than Tupac and Biggie and Eminem and Snoop Dogg and all these people, and they're not singing about the club and baby mamas and that sort of thing. And so also, like, if you listen to country music, even since like when I was a kid, country music is what we listened to. I lived out in Cheney, Washington. Our channel was 99.9 Coyote Country, and it was country music. And even since I've been alive, like, country music has gotten awful. Like, it's just like it's only ever about getting drunk and like going out with a girl in one night stand. And I'm like, that's not it's not rap's fault.
And a pickup truck.
Yeah, and a pickup truck, yes.
It's funny that you mentioned country now, because I need to find the source for this. But I read just in passing that people were more likely to accept a song. Like, so if you have a set lyrics for a piece and you put it to a rap piece, or you can put it to a country piece, just the same lyrics. More people would prefer the country piece over the rap piece, even though they say the same thing, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I'll need to find where I found that, but
Yeah, we might be able to post a link down below for you guys who are also interested.
Yeah, and always, anytime any of our viewers want sources from us, if you want that, you can just email us, cruxofthematterpodcast@gmail.com. We have show notes. Sometimes we'll have our own individual notes every now and then, and we'll have sources ready to go. So if you doubt the efficacy of one of our claims, we always provide sources. Just ask for them.
Indeed. And so on to our last guest to explain, is rap music? We have a very, very special guest today.
Okay, folks. I don't have that much time, okay? I have a show to run. People try to deny it, but the truth is clear. Okay, folks, rap is a form of music. That's all it is. No fear. It's not about what you think or how you feel. Facts don't care about your feelings, folks. They're real. We need to add a beat to that in post.
How did he find it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Written by what is it called? What's the name of the?
Written by ChatGPT. All the hype nowadays.
ChatGPT.
There is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fun.
That's yeah. It's still not real art. If we're gonna have to have, when we have our art episode eventually, we're gonna have to talk about how AI art is not real art, because they can't draw eyes. Like if you ever got, they can do like a lot of things like really detailed, and then you get to the eyes and it's just the uncanny like valley look, and it's like, nope, don't want it.
And then there's like the AI bots that steal from actual art, like that's a whole can of worms.
Yes, and I have a couple artist friends who really are not big fans of that at all. But yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground today, and we had a lot of different things. Music is obviously one of those subjects that's so huge we couldn't fit it all into one episode. But it was nice to have an expert and someone who actually knows what they're talking about on the episode today.
Yes, indeed.
So, is there any last couple things you want to hit, Landon?
Yeah, just asking Arthur, anything you want to plug? Completely, floor is yours.
I don't personally have any YouTube channels or anything like that, so there's not much there. But I am thinking about putting together a playlist. Maybe you can link this in a description soon. Putting together a playlist of just all sorts of different songs that I feel like most people should give a listen to, whether it's for the lyrics or just for the beat.
That might just be one of the best things. Yeah. Oh, that'll be fun.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's our call to action, is you're going to click on that playlist. You're going to listen to some actually good music and be a better person for it.
Yes.
The first song will be a Rickroll. No.
Yeah. That's actually a banger of a song, and I will fight anyone who thinks that song isn't good.
Is.
Just because it's been played 10,000 times, that doesn't mean it's not good.
Never overplay it. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, my sister can play that on the piano. Anyway.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, Arthur, for coming on today for a special episode 7. And Riley, why don't you close us out? I'm Landon Connor.
Sure. I'm Riley Stansberry. You've watched the Crux of the Matter 7th episode. We'll see you guys next time.